So how do you get past the fear of being judged by others? We're all going to be judged by others, and we're all going to fear it to some degree, but there is definitely things that you can do to insulate yourself from that fear. Um, so we'll go in order of importance, like the least important to the most important practice that you can take on. Number five is to challenge negative self-talk. And I really like to call it self-talk. So right now in your head, you're not just listening to me, you're also listening to you. So in that loop that's in your head, there's either a predominantly negative narrative or a predominantly positive narrative. Um, Personally, for me, I'm 54 now, and it didn't happen until after many, many years of study until my 40s when I started to really be able to shift that negative narrative in my head to a positive narrative. Um, so the first step is to really just notice what is the tone of your narrative in your head? Are you saying bad things about yourself? Are you saying good things about yourself? The more bad things you're saying about yourself in your head, then the more you're going to fear the judgment of others, because they're going to push buttons that reinforce fears that are already circling in your brain. So the tip number one, the practice number one, is to start really becoming aware of the tone of your narrative in your head. And then practice, what I like to do is I'll practice cutting. If I'm noticing that there's a narrative that really serves me no purpose at this point, I'm starting to notice that it's happening, I'll just cut it off. And it'll come back, but then just cut it off again. So the first step is really like starting to observe that narrative. And most of us don't do that. Most of us just let that thing go. And you call it yourself, but it's not really you. It's just a habit that you've had. And a lot of times it comes from our parents or our friends or something way outside of our culture that has pushed into our head and grabbed space inside our mind. So practice number one, notice that, cut it, and then replace it with the how you replace it will come into the next practices. So that's number five. Number four, uh, in terms of importance, would be to, this is probably higher than four, but for sake of argument today, let's call it number four, is to fire the vampires from your inner social circle. And when I say social circle, I mean social relationships, parasocial media relationships, anyone who's blasting negativity or sucking your attention in without actually giving you anything in return um, is a vampire. And when I say vampire, I really mean anybody or anything that makes you feel more afraid, that makes you feel weakened. So a lot of times vampires are very creative, and they'll push you up and then they'll bring you down, and they'll push you up and then you don't even know why you feel icky afterwards interacting with them. You felt all kind of good in the beginning, but then you feel kind of gross afterwards. So it's touchy because sometimes we're dealing with our own stuff when we're trying to identify vampires in our life. Um, but for the most part, if you just start reducing and eliminating interaction with people that make you feel worse about yourself, that's a good place to start. When, let's say you wanted to become an extreme athlete, let's say you wanted to be a cyclist, you want to be the best cyclist in the world. If you had a very domineering coach who kind of made you feel like you weren't good enough at what you did, but he was always pushing you, or she was always pushing you to be a little bit better, now that might be okay. That might not actually be a vampire relationship. It's not necessarily positive or negative, the way they speak or the way they interact. What you should notice in a positive relationship is that you're striving to be better and you're starting to feel a little bit better about yourself, even if you're struggling in the moment with those persons. It's not about struggling in the moment, it's about the overall impact of the relationship on your life. So that's number four. Number three is, this one gets to challenging the negative self-talk. That would be to start to write down or reinforce it another way. Writing down is a real simple way to do it. Everything that you're good at. Everybody has superpowers. Everybody has strengths. So start to focus on those strengths. And I'm going to add a 3A. Inside of that is also to do the practice of gratitude. So every day in our household, we say three things we're authentically grateful for when we sit down and eat together. You can do it in a morning practice, whatever. But the practice of giving gratitude will start to give you more of a kind of like a blanket inside your soul that will insulate you from the judgment of others. So, judgment from others is most painful when it hits a point that you feel sensitive or weak about, and you haven't fully accepted in yourself. So, gratitude of all the things that you do have kind of like insulates you from that. Number two, in terms of important, the second most important thing is to just know that this is just something to adopt. Just know that when people are judging you, um, usually, almost always, it represents a weakness in them. So when you see judgment from others, not as a weakness in yourself, even if they did hit something that you're honestly like, oh, I don't like that about myself. Even when you feel that, just know that when people are judging you, it's usually weakness in them. Now, we all judge people all the time in order to survive in life. Like, I don't know if I can trust that person because they've said and done some things that seem a little fishy to me. It's not about being non-judgmental. That's sort of this thing that I hear in New Age ideas or just very surface ideas about being a good person. You judge people, and you got to judge people. That's the way it works. But being affected by someone else's judgment and having it make you feel bad, that's going to happen. But all of these practices will help it not stop you in life. And just knowing that the negative judgment is really about them. It's really about when people, there's a great saying, you can tell more about a person by what they say about others than by what others say about them. So if someone's judging you or talking bad about you to others or talking bad about you to your face, usually they don't do that. Usually they talk bad about others or do the anonymous internet troll thing. But those people are weak. For lack of a better time, I'm just going to say that. They're like spiritually weak. And what they need to do to feel good inside, to lift their poor self-image up, is to bring others down. And so when someone else is trying to bring you down, know that they're trying to lift themselves up, and it really doesn't have anything to do with who you are. And then the last one, and the most important practice to be insulated from the judgments of others, is to learn to love your weaknesses. Now, I'm scatterbrained. I have a very difficult time holding my attention on one thing. But that's fine. That's just who I am. So now I'm not trying to be somebody other than I am. Now, I may do things to try to focus a little bit more to compensate for that, but I'm not trying to be somebody fundamentally different than that. That's really the rub when you're sort of growing and developing yourself. Now, I have a lot of years of hindsight. Being 54, I've gone through my 30 plus, 40 plus years of evolving a self-identity. But in those early years, it was very, very much about me trying to change myself into something that I wasn't. And that's what caused me a lot, and most people, a lot of pain in our youth and fear of being judged by others, is by not accepting the quote unquote negative parts of ourselves. So here's the thing. You and I are always going to have weaknesses, and we're always going to have strengths. And so it's that yin and yang. It's that balance of weakness and strength that interact with one another. You don't get to be ultra focused without losing a little bit of your visionariness. So I use that as an example for me. Like, since it's hard for me to focus, I accept and embrace my strength of visionary ideas, which I have, and then this challenge of being focused. And I still compensate for my lack of focus, by practices and surrounding myself with people and structures that keep me focused, so that I'm not ignoring that as a weakness of mine. But I don't see that as, I don't get stuck. If someone's like, you're so scatterbrained, right? Which would be a totally legitimate thing to say about me. I'll be like, you're right, I am. And that's the big, big, big takeaway from today's teaching, is figure out what you're bad at, what your weakness is, and sure, compensate for that. Do some extra reps in the gym, whatever it is, but don't fundamentally think that you have to become something other than you are. Just accept the totality of who you are, and then find the strengths that are counterbalances to those weaknesses that you're already good at. You know, um, for me, I'm gonna embrace my visionary nature, and I'm gonna compensate for my lack of focus. But I'm not gonna think negatively about myself. So then, when somebody else points out my weakness, it doesn't bother me anymore. And the bonus practice is just when you do get down or stopped because you're feeling the judgment of others, go back to the gratitudes. Go back to, find somebody who supports you and loves you and knows all your strengths. And then I would say the next and probably bonus level on uh, insulating yourself from the judgment of others is refine your purpose. My purpose is to restore the humanity's relationship with nature, and at the same time restore our relationship with it. Well, not restore, but enhance our relationship with ourselves so that we can live in vitality and joy and have a great life, even amidst this chaotic destruction of the beautiful life on earth that's happening around us, and try to be part of the solution. So I'm clear on my purpose, and it insulates me from the people who judge me. So get clear on your purpose, challenge the negative self-talk, eliminate the vampires from your life, list your strengths, know that when people are judging you, it's really just the weakness in themselves that they're projecting out at you. Love those weaknesses in yourself. Accept the totality of you are, the strengths and the weaknesses. They can't not live together. They're two parts of a whole. There's dark and there's light. Your weaknesses and your strengths go together. I hope this has been helpful. Have a wonderful day. Please like, subscribe, and comment, and leave questions, and we will connect with you next time.